Good evening and welcome. I am delighted by the energy in the room tonight. Thank you for being here. I'm Hannah Weissman, Executive Director of the Magnes, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and our distinguished speakers this evening. Before we begin, please do take a moment to silence your cell phones or anything else that might make noise in the next 90 minutes, and note the emergency exits at the front and back of the room. Whether this is your first time here or you come frequently, thank you for being part of the Magnes community. The Magnes is a community-supported museum dedicated to generating new knowledge and understanding of Jewish cultures, which we do primarily through the exceptional collections in our care. The museum's holdings span time and geography, representing the fullness of Jewish life in the diaspora and demonstrating that there is no singular Jewish experience. We're offering tonight's program in conjunction with our current exhibition, Flowing Through Time and Tradition. I invite you to return and bring the insights from tonight's program as a lens through which to view the art and objects on view in the exhibition. Thank you to our partners, Ayin Press and the Jewish Studio Project, as well as Afikomen Books, for helping make tonight's program possible. And thank you to the Magnes staff. Every time we do a program like this, it takes a whole team to make it happen. And we're grateful for the staff who do that, especially Dan Alter, for the work that's gone into tonight's program and all of our programs. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers and our guides for exploring the intersections of text, image, and creativity. Dan Alter will moderate tonight's conversation between Rabbi Adina Allen and Naomie Kremer. Dan is the author of 2 collections of poetry, My Little Book of Exiles and Hills Full of Holes. He's also the translator of Take a Breath, You're Getting Excited, from Hebrew of Yakir ben Moshe. He's taught classes and facilitated conversations on many topics related to Jewish poetry. Rabbi Adina Allen is a spiritual leader, writer, and visionary educator, pioneering a contemporary Jewish path grounded in transformative power of creativity. As co-founder and creative director of Jewish Studio Project, she's shaping a movement that places creativity at the heart of Jewish life. Integrating insights from the field of art therapy with Jewish text study and spiritual practice, Adina developed the Jewish Studio Process, a groundbreaking methodology that activates creativity as a force for healing, connection, and social transformation. She's the author of The Place of All Possibility, Cultivating Creativity Through Ancient Jewish Wisdom, which you can pick up from Afikomen Books here tonight. The book reframes Torah as a guide for creative awakening and spiritual transformation. Naomie Kremer is a painter, video artist, stage designer who has exhibited widely in the US and abroad. Her work is in many private and public collections, including the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Berkeley Art Museum, the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, and even the Magnes collection of Jewish art and life. Her imagery, though largely abstract, is based in the real world. She incorporates nature, architecture, language, letter forms, and the human figure, and her work draws from a wide range of sources such as art history, music, poetry, and literature. Her video-based set designs for productions like The Secret Garden, co-commissioned by the San Francisco Opera and Cal Performances, led her to begin combining painting and video. In the Beginning Was Desire was her first film project, and she has also taught painting and drawing and has been a visiting artist and guest lecturer at schools in the United States and Europe. And now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dan Alter, Rabbi Adina Allen, and Naomie Kremer to the stage.
Well, of course, I'm thrilled to be sitting here with the two of you and all of you. As the person who for whom many of the programs that happen here begin as a twinkle in my eye, it's always a thrill to see them come to life with all of us together. this program started in a couple of ways. We have this gorgeous exhibition this year called Flowing Through Time and Tradition, which is an exploration of water in the Magnes collection and of water in Jewish life and tradition. And in that exhibition, there are actually a number of really marvelous works of what I call visual midrash, right? And so midrash is the process that Jews have used for thousands of years. I think we can safely say that, as a way of layering creation onto creation, or imagining our way freshly into canonical, into received texts. And so in the exhibition, I'll just point you towards, and I hope you'll take a look tonight or another visit. This is just a lightning tour. We have a number of things about Genesis, about Bereshit, or working with Bereshit, with Genesis. One of them is the Ori Sherman Creation Series, that are stunning visual works about Genesis from the 1980s San Francisco. And then on the other side of the room and the time scale, we have an anonymous wool tapestry of Rebecca and Abraham's servant at the well, and it's from 1800s Vienna. It's really something to sit and look at what that stitching was to create that visual work. And then on another side of the room, we have a painting by Eugene Abischaus, who was from the former Soviet Union. It's called Jonah and the Whale in Haifa. And it's Haifa port, and it's from the late 70s Tel Aviv. So just a few examples of what we have here. And then this program came to life because Naomie brought to us this film that many of you got a chance to see, and you can see it afterwards. If you didn't, it's also wonderful. And it's a work of visual midrash. And then I thought, I've been wanting an excuse to bring Rabbi Adina Allen here, who's developed a way of letting everyone participate in that process. And so anyway, here we are to have a conversation. And I'll start, the question that I want to start with for both of you is, can you talk about the convergence or divergence or ebb and flow of Judaism and art or creativity in your lives?
You wanted me to go first, yeah. Hi everyone, it's wonderful to be with you. It's so just nice to get together and talk about creativity and Torah at such a difficult time, and to be together in community. So thank you for being here, thank you for having us. And I'll say already one of the benefits of this collaboration is now we know each other and our friends, new friends, and I got to do a studio visit to Naomie's studio, and we already have another collaboration in the works, so already grateful. Sure, I'll talk a little bit about Judaism and creativity in my life. That was a question. So I often say I grew up in an art studio. I grew up in suburban Chicago, and my mom, Pat Allen, is a world leader in the field of art therapy. And in our house, the studio was the biggest room growing up. So I grew up with being invited into the studio by my mother as a place where you could be with all the raw and messy and in process and unclear and maybe less palatable parts of self. And invited to use art materials, all the wild and wonderful things we had on the wall in our studio, small bones she had found on the street, and shards of glass, and nails, and paints, and glitter, and feathers, and all kinds of things. For those where I was invited to use those as materials to explore my inner world. And I would say not in the way that we might think of it now of like, here's a project for you, but in the way that she would go into the studio to access her artist self and invite me to be alongside her tending her inner fire and inviting me to do the same. And I think, as I look back on on it, I have come to understand that using the creative process in that way was really a way to access not only a deep place within myself, but you could also call it God, the divine, inner wisdom, intuition, a way of knowing that wasn't already accessible to the intellectual mind. I think I came to put that together officially with Judaism much, much later. I won't take you through every part of my path, but I went to rabbinical school, as mentioned, at Hebrew College in Boston, which is a non-denominational training program. And I fell in love with text study, with this process of midrash, this process of bringing ourselves to the text, of chavruta, this Jewish practice of paired study, where you get to come together and discuss what's on the page and bring forth your own interpretations. And yet I felt like, as intellectually stimulating and interesting as that process was, that there was still something being left on the table. That we were still, though we were activated and alive to the text, we were still only engaging from here up. And there was a way in which this intellectual material wasn't dropping down into the fullness of who we are. I think that's the best way I have to describe it. To mix with the fullness of who we are so that something really transformative could happen on the other side. My mom developed a process called the Open Studio process, which is now used in communities around the world, from Taiwan to Spain to Mexico, and been adapted to those cultural contexts. And I started bringing that Open Studio process into the Beit Midrash, into the House of Jewish Learning, to say what might happen if, after engaging in the very Jewish and juicy intellectual process of text study, we then moved into a process of intuitive art making, not needing to have any skill, not needing to depict what's on the page, but just moving into almost a moving meditation with materials in your hands, to let the material like percolate, to let it settle, to let it drop down and work on us rather than us having to work so hard on it. And I discovered, I think what I maybe intuited as I practiced this with colleagues and teachers, how many incredible new interpretations and questions and insights came forth on the other side of that process that would not have come just through a deep and powerful, but still just a discussion of the text. So I will say that's part of how Judaism and creativity, and I think we'll share more, have come together, but that has formed the Jewish Studio process, which is now the foundation of the work of our organization that we train people in and teach and bring to individuals and organizations across the country. But I'll just say foundational to that is the belief that every single one of us are creative. Already I had a conversation with someone who walked in saying, oh, we're going to do art, I'm not an artist. And then that person reminded me, well, my granddaughter told me actually, just use some materials, put down some marks. And so just a reminder that I think just as we're all created in God's image, we're all created with this creative capacity. And art, there is an amazing field of artists who are dedicating their work to making incredible art. And these materials are all of us, all of ours, to play with, to use, to access parts of ourselves that we might not be able to access any other way.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Adina. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you a little bit and hearing about your amazing journey into learning Hebrew, basically, in order to access the Bible directly in the original language. So it's incredibly impressive. So my story is a little bit the opposite, because I started from, I grew up in a religious home, an Orthodox home. I was born in Israel, so my first language is Hebrew, and I didn't speak a word of English till I was 8 years old. In fact, in the Orthodox tradition, as we all know, the depiction of a real person is not necessarily considered okay. So abstraction is really part of the more orthodox approach to visual content. But the thing that really first engaged me was the Hebrew alphabet. I have a very strong memory, and one has a few memories as a small child, and one of them is learning how to write Hebrew. And I remember, sitting in a sweaty kitchen with a pencil and trying to write, olives, big olives. And the Hebrew alphabet has always been incredibly generative for me. Then as I grew up and I kind of left Orthodoxy, and I haven't really engaged much with Jewish thought, Jewish tradition, other than having, gone to yeshiva till I was 17 years old. So, there's a lot of information in there that in some ways I was trying to forget. Because I think that, making art is a journey. You can't start from knowing too much. It's really, you start from not knowing. And ambiguity and a little bit of chaos, and that's really a very generative process. I was reading some of your book today, I was looking over it, and it talks about how creation and the created, the creator and creation, the creator and his creation, we won't say his necessarily, but and I was thinking how interesting it is that creation, not created. Created is sort of a passive word, it's the end of something, whereas a creation, it's both an active, it's a verb. In the process of creation, you are a creation and you create. So I was very interested that, there's this relationship between the creator and us. And myself as a creator, I look at my work, and the work is a creation, and it talks back to me, and it's really a dialogue. The process of making art is a dialogue between myself and the thing that I am making. It's not a one-way thing where I am putting down what is inside me. It is feeding me back information that I then respond to. As far as, it seems as though lately, in the last, 10 years or so, the Jewish part of my life is coming back in a pretty present way, one way or another. The Magnes with this, the work with David Grubin, who was the director with whom I collaborated on the film you just saw. And then just coincidentally, this weekend was my granddaughter's bat mitzvah. And I had a chance to look at the Torah, a Torah scroll, because they had borrowed a Torah scroll for her to read from in the venue where she had the bat mitzvah. And I very respectfully begged to have my hands on it for a little while. And I had a friend, and we scrolled it open and closed, and it was just so powerful. I noticed also with the letter forms that there are these little ornaments on top of the letters that look like little crowns. Having a really close look at it was the closest look I've ever had at a Torah. Although my sons, we had a Torah for their bar mitzvah, but I don't remember looking at it that closely. And then I noticed that some of the letters have 3 little ornaments and some have 1, but there are never 2 ornaments. And so I asked ChatGPT about that. And he said, yeah, never 2, just 1 or 3, and I don't remember why exactly. I think it's more dynamic, that the 2 is somehow static. I do know that odd numbers, and in composition, an odd number of places of emphasis is always very, has much more energy than even numbers. So.
Yes, please.
Is that okay if I ask a question?
Oh, this is what we're doing.
Okay, great. Okay, I was really excited by, so much of what you said, but I was thinking a lot about collaboration with materials. And I wanted to tie it into a text from Torah, and then I want to ask you a question from it. Is that okay? Okay, great. So we at Jewish Studio Project think a lot about the opening lines of Genesis and of creation, so I love that you spent so much time with it there. There's, as you know, a lot of that in the book. And feels especially poignant in these days, thinking about the opening, in those opening lines, we hear about the ha'aretz hayta tohu vavohu, and the earth was chaos and void. And often the way the creation story is told is there was nothing there, and God is so powerful that God created everything from nothing. And that's certainly one interpretation that I think is valid and is there. The words that are there in the beginning of the story, it says, Ha'aretz hayta tohu vavohu, and the earth was chaos and void, and there was darkness and these depths and these waters there. And a lot of, I think, what I'm trying to do in this book and with this work is sort of reimagining some of the traditional sort of like dominant, maybe male God language interpretations that are given to us of Torah. And what I really love thinking about is actually the tohu vavohu, the darkness and the depths, the chaos and the void, being there as the raw materials that God worked with in shaping the world. And that God wasn't, as much as God has a body or we can anthropomorphize, God actually got God's hands dirty with those materials, was playing in the muck and the mud of what was there, and like almost like playfully, like delighting in seeing what would come forth. So I just want to offer that image alongside this sort of pristine, removed God that is planfully executing according to step by step. A God that's like playing in the darkness and the depths and the chaos and the void and like seeing like, what could this be? What might this become? And I offer that because I think that feels more true to me in my experience of creating, of being alive at this time in the world, and maybe every time in the world, that there's chaos and void and darkness and depths within each and every one of us, and obviously within our collective life as a people. And so we are all given the gift of creativity, of creative play, as a way to work with those elements and transform them into the world that we seek in the same way that God did, each and every one of us as creatures created in God's image. So with that, I wanted to ask you, because I loved when I was at your studio, and I remember you, first of all, just that you use so many different medium and modalities, but one of the images that was sticking with me is a painting that was amazing that you were showing me, that you got kind of in love with this certain sort of form, and then it like became stuck for you, and then you needed to like let it move you into something else. And I'm wondering if you can speak about your own painting process and either an experience of the material speaking to you, or like what that collaboration feels like for you as an artist.
The process is very, very malleable. There's really no predicting how something is going to emerge. My favorite thing is starting, first of all. Some people talk about the blank page or the blank canvas, but I love starting, and so I never have any difficulty with starting. It's the middle that's hard. Because I find that often the first marks are the most exciting. I mean, they're just seeing, the work that I was talking to you about getting stuck with is, I've been starting with black, heavy black acrylic paint, and it's so strong once it's there, the black and the white, and it looks so good. But I know it's not finished, and so it sort of kind of reminds me of the idea of God and creation, the 6 days, that, every day it was like, okay, I'll make some of this, and it's not quite finished, and it's interesting that it wasn't finished until he created humans, and I have to say that, I'm not a traditional believer in any way. And I think of God as, in some ways, having a lot of human qualities. And in this film, for those of you who saw it, Aviva Zornberg asks, well, what does God want? And she answers, he wants us to desire him. And I think it's so interesting that, so desire is an important part of the creative process. We have a desire for something that is, that speaks back to us, that becomes alive in a way that mirrors us, that isn't just kind of, in other words, when people ask me, how do I know I finished a painting? Because my paintings tend to be very, very full. And I say first of all, I can't exactly remember it. Every time I come and look at it, I don't exactly remember it. I look at it, I enter it from a different place every time. So it's alive, it remains alive for me.
Thank you. Thank you both. Well, maybe this is the time where you could each share a piece of your work, right? Naomie's going to show us a clip, and then Adina will read a piece of the book, so we get to taste it. And before I forget, I wanted to thank Ayin from Afikomen Books for being here with lots of copies of The Place of All Possibility, which are yours for the buying, and Adina's here to sign them.
I'm a great book signer, I promise you.
So, are we ready
So this clip I chose because it was hard to pick from a 40-minute film. I'll talk just a little bit about my process in working on the film. So the story of Genesis, which I would read frequently with my father on Shabbat mornings or afternoons, we would just sit, and he loved the Torah, and he loved teaching it. And my sister was not very interested, but I was, and I remember reading it with him, and the stories were just so evocative and so, they just triggered the imagination, like what did it look like, and tohu vavohu, the idea that there was no separation and everything was, but yet it had all the potential. So in a way, the beginning of a work of art is a tohu vavohu. There, it's full of potential, and you don't know how it will play out. As I worked on the film and thought about, well, how do I develop these visuals? Where are they going to come from? So many scenes have some aspect of my paintings in them. Some of them contain animals that I videotaped, and I also worked a lot with the letter forms because, as I said, I'm absolutely mesmerized with the Hebrew alphabet. This section shows just a little bit of some of that.
The real question I have about the first man, is he really us? I think in important ways he's not like us. The original man, Adam, didn't have parents. And I think that makes all the difference. He came into the world without a background, without heredity, without the conflicts that arise between parents and children. The original man is without all that. He comes with unnatural cleanness into the world. He is a kind of robot figure. His inner life is very simple. It's a very harmonious sense of what a human being's life is. And I suggest that that's not who we are. How does that develop into me? Where does he begin to get humanized? Eve. The story of Adam and Eve is about how there comes to be a human being who is like us.
Who is this snake? It kind of begs the question to say, well, he's the devil.
There's something primal about evil. And since evil is not located within man, because man isn't complex enough to know good and evil, it has to be somewhere else. It's external to man. So we have this snake. The midrash that I'm thinking of is quite, it's very sexual. It really says that the snake watched the innocent coupling of man and woman. You know, how without lust, how perfectly harmonious it was. And in some way he envied it.
So Aviva, tell me how you found the process of writing the book.
You asked about the process. I don't want to just leave, let's just give another round of applause. That was beautiful to get to take that work. And I think we're going to have a little bit of time for questions, so I feel like we're dropping a couple of things in here, and you can think what you might want to ask about, and we'll open it up for questions. The process of writing the book was a really incredible creative process, also very painful and joyful and so many things. It's like the work of art that I have engaged with the most for the longest. I feel really lucky to have one of my editors here from Ayin. Yay. But I think some people know this story, but I started writing a book and I worked with a mainstream editor and I was going to bring it to a mainstream press. And then in one of our conversations moving towards publishing, I was asked to make the book viable, I would need to make it 60% less Jewish. Which, first of all, it's just, it's sad, but it's also a little bit funny. Like, what is 60% less Jewish? What does that even mean? And to her credit, this editor wasn't saying that that's what she thought I should do, but she was saying, for our press and what we can get on the shelves of Whole Foods for people to buy while they're walking down the aisle, this needs to be sort of a, basic creativity book and not like a Torah book. And yeah, I kind of felt, I was like, okay, I'll try to write that book. And then I say like the Shekhinah, the presence of God just completely left. It was like, no, there was no inspiration, there was no energy, it just like fell apart. And then I got depressed for a little while. And then I started just waking up without an alarm at like 2 a.m. I have 2 young kids and I run an organization, so there's not a lot of like interstitial like free time. But my body started waking me up at 2 a.m. and I would just go in the guest room and start writing. I was like, I'm just gonna write the book that I need to write for myself. No one's ever gonna see it, it'll never see the light of day, but I just need to write all the things that I'm learning that, you know, we're co-creating together at Jewish Studio Project and the Torah that's been coming through. And at that same time, Ayin Press was sort of coming onto the scene, and I had done an article with them about chaos and void and God as holy fool. God is the holy fool, that sort of image of God as creator. And my editor there, Ayin, who was a long-time friend, said after that, oh, do you have anything that might be book length? And the serendipity of having this material that I had been working on and writing, and then getting to partner with Ayin in that, and having the importance of a Jewish, rooted in Judaism, emanating outward, I think is how you say it, press is just so incredible and such a gift to our community, and so support Ayin Press. They did not ask me to make it 60% less Jewish. And I think we were both going to share a little part. Is that okay to like read a little part? Okay.
Please.
So I thought I'd read also one of my teachers, Dr. Movila Hellner-Eshid, is here in the room, which I feel so blessed by and grateful for, and I draw on your work in this little section, so I thought I'd read it, and it also is about water, so it ties into the exhibit. Okay. The wellspring. The Talmud records a conversation between the 1st century sage, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and his student, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, on the power and necessity of creativity, which speaks to the kind of experiences I had growing up in my mom's studio. Seeking to be inspired by new interpretations of Torah and acknowledging the wisdom of his student, Rabbi Yochanan says, Eliezer, teach us one thing from the words of the wise. And Rabbi Eliezer demurs and instead says to his teacher, let me give you a parable. To what may I be compared? To a cistern that cannot produce more water than was put in it. Rabbi Eliezer is telling Rabbi Yochanan basically that he, like a cistern, is simply a vessel to hold and preserve his teacher's, Rabbi Yochanan's wisdom, the water in this analogy. Rabbi Yochanan replies, no, my student, let me give you a parable. To what may you be compared? To a spring. Just as when a spring begins to flow, it produces water from its own sources, so you can teach words of Torah more than were conveyed to Moses at Mount Sinai. In his reply, Rabbi Yochanan seems to be saying to his student, Rabbi Eliezer, that the great voice that the ancient Israelites heard on Mount Sinai is still speaking. Torah, he is saying, is a wellspring bubbling inside you. Let those waters flow so that we all may have a sip. Whether we consider ourselves sage or student or both, inside each one of us there's a bubbling spring of life-giving water. Call it God, intuition, vision. It is there within us and will remain there as long as we are alive. Sometimes it gets hidden underneath the mess of life, but whenever we are ready to uncover it, we need only to move aside the debris that has blocked its path, and we will find it there, flowing crisp and cool, nurturing and clear, a spring of vitality ready to renew us. The spring of creativity is our most potent renewable resource. It's how we stay awake to the beauty and the possibility amidst the disarray and disappointment of life. It's how we envision new paths and work up the courage to follow them. It's how we bring forth insights that can transform barriers into thresholds and reveal possibilities that were previously unimaginable. Creativity is a capacity that exists in everyone. The sparking of new energy and fresh insight. It is inspiration and imagination. It is resilience. It is the ability to move with and through challenge and change with openness, curiosity, and courage. And I just wanted to bring in this piece because it also brings in Adam and Eve. So I think taking this idea of this stream and this sort of idea, this flow of creativity, this idea of the life-giving flow of creativity is found throughout the expansive body of ancient Jewish wisdom. In Torah, when Adam and Eve, the first human beings, are created, they're situated in the Garden of Eden. As described in Genesis, Eden was a verdant paradise of lush fruit trees, and through it a stream flowed. The stream gently and steadily percolated through the garden, providing water, the necessary ingredient for life. The Zohar, a book of mystical commentary on the Torah, teaches that this stream symbolizes God, the animating force of the universe that flows through all of creation, and that we are the garden watered by this divine flow. Here's where I'm citing Melila. Or, in the words of the writer and ecologist John Muir, the river flows not past, but through us, thrilling, tingling, vibrating every fiber and cell of the substance of our bodies, making them glide and sing. Our task is to keep the channel open so that we may receive the flow of creativity and our garden may remain lush and verdant. We got the garden, we got the water.
It's all flowing right through the stage. Yeah, I'm just noting as I listen to each of you that you're both animated with a particular animated, and I was thinking that is exactly the right word, right? You're full of life, each of you in a kind of a life course that involves creativity, that involves and the different ways that it connects to the larger things. And it's lovely to have you here. I think we might open it up for questions now, if the two of you are ready for that. And so we have a few minutes for questions before we invite you to participate in a no expertise required hands-on
really fun
art making workshop. So if anyone would like to ask.
I know inspiration comes from so many different places, and I'm wondering, in your work, when you're inspired to do something, do you find you end up doing a series of explorations, or it's a theme you stay with for a while before you then move on to something else? Or how does that work for you?
I do tend to work in a particular vein for a while. But the interesting thing is that the thing that you are so excited about when you first come upon it, I guess, when you first find it, eventually becomes sort of a trap. It's like the first time I do something is always wonderful. I'm kind of one of those beginner's mind people. And the thing I have to sort of trick myself into doing is always feel like I'm starting. There are different ways of doing that. I mean, my inspiration, comes from many different places. It's for a long time it was poetry, there's a period of years that I really got into poetry that I had never, in a way that I'd never really been interested in as a younger person. And then one day I just stopped. I stopped looking at poetry in order to get interested. I've always looked at pictures of things, photographs in the newspaper or magazines that sort of catch my eye because they flatten the content in a way that's very graphic, and so it's very easy to start on something. But the other thing about me is that I hate to know where I'm going. If I know where I'm going when I start, I am immediately bored. So even though I'm looking at a photograph of something, when I'm starting, within literally 15 minutes, I'm like moved on. So the trick is to get started, and what it is that triggers the beginning is really the thing that that you nurture. Is how am I going to find that first trigger, and that it's by looking, by traveling, by reading, by talking. It can come from anything.
First of all, thank you. It's beautiful and luscious. My name is Magda, and I am functionally deaf, and I have the gift of restored hearing with cochlear implantation. So I'm particularly interested in creativity and sound. And I was wondering if you could talk in the movie or in the film about how you chose to weave sound into your telling of your story. The voices, the background music, there's layers in there. And how, even though we can't see it, it creates an invitation if you can hear it. So I was curious about hearing and sound and creativity. And I asked you the same question because it's not see, oh God. It's hear, oh God. We are hearing people before we are seeing people. And if you want to reflect about the power of sound in Genesis, boy, that would be cool too. But we can have coffee on that.
So, they say that sound is 50% of film's power. So it's really, and I have to mention that I almost always work with some music in the room. And the music I like is mostly abstract music. I don't like music with words in it. And I never listen to podcasts or anything like that when I'm working. It's really, I like music that surprises me. So I have to also say that the film was edited and directed by David Rubin. So I am not really responsible for the sound in this film. But I do know that when I think about sound, you want it to surprise you in a way. You don't want it to be echoing the visual. You want it to, in a way, be contrasting and just kind of adding another input from a different direction. Not just sort of like an underline of what's going on.
Thanks so much for sharing that and for that question. The thing that it made me think of was going back to the tohu vavohu, the chaos and void, and the more time I've spent with it, the more I've found interpretations that talk about it not even as like tangible material, but as like that it was a sound, like the initial vibration is what began the entire universe, and that tohu vohu, tohu, like even the way that pair of words sounds together is like sort of a vibrational frequency. So that's what it made me think of, and when we engage in the Jewish studio process, which is a learning and creative and spiritual methodology, we talk a lot about building shared resonance, and that's what we're doing between ourselves and our own soul, between ourselves and the people in the room with us, and between ourselves and the soul of the world and God. And so I think resonance, it relates to hearing, but also how we hear not just with our ears, but like the vibrations, we feel it in all parts of our body. And so that's what it made me think of.
Both of you started with stories of origin and childhood and how that shaped your creative approach. And so I'm thinking of Adore, like how do you see this kind of transition and the role of creativity and transition, both the tradition as well as texts and other things into a new generation?
Say the end part of the question, how do we see creativity in this time of transition?
Well, in transitioning to a new generation, like creativity is our way of transitioning or transferring the tradition and text and other things to a new generation.
Yeah, love that. The thing that made me think about was, we call Torah Eitz Chaim Hi. She's a tree of life, that she's meant to be this living, breathing, pulsing, shedding leaves, dropping down roots, like within an ecosystem, sort of. That's how I picture it. And a tree can only live and breathe with like inputs coming into it. Like it's in relationship, it lives in relationship. And so I think about when we bring our creativity to Torah, what a gift that is to Torah. That is how she becomes a living, breathing, pulsing, growing tree of life. And I think for so many generations, that project of bringing our interpretation and voice to Torah has been limited to really a select few. Purposefully or not, or by way of all the different tragedies and ways that history has shaped us. But I think we're living in a time in which Torah wants to be alive in all of our mouths and all of our ears and all of our hearts. And we say there's 70 faces, which is meant to mean like there's endless faces of Torah. There's a midrash that says, Torah was like a picture that looked on all of us, and we each gaze back on it. And I picture like from all around the circle, right? Like each of us have a vantage point on Torah, And that vantage point is true, but the full picture can't come into focus until all those vantage points around the circle are brought to the fore. And so I think that creativity, when we each bring our creativity to Torah, it's an incredible gift to tradition, to our ancestors, to future generations, and to one another, to let Torah live and breathe and grow in our mouths and minds and hearts.
I also wanted to mention that one of the wonderful things about the Torah is that it's written in a language that is not contemporary. So I speak contemporary Hebrew, and when I read the Torah, the grammatical and it's very ambiguous and archaic, and that fact is partly what keeps it alive. Because kind of when I mentioned about looking at my paintings, when I know something, I'm not interested in it anymore. So it's the fact that you can't quite know it that keeps it open, I think, and alive from generation to generation. And then the other thing is that all the commentaries, they really interweave across time and across the page. So it's both a spatial, a visual, and a meaning depth that it covers.
Thanks. Thank you to both of you. Those beautiful responses and all the things you shared. And we're going to just so I want everyone to have the chance to get your hands on the colors and do a little messing around. If I'm not wrong, have a little chaos and creation. Let's give our presenters a hand.
Thank you, Dan. It's been wonderful talking to you about this process and working on it with you, and you've really given us a lot of food for thought and energy, good energy.
Thank you.